Pleasant good afternoon. Poor people, Governor, with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I'm responsible for what I say, not what you interpret. I must apologize for yesterday. We had a false start. Technology sometimes it gives you ups and downs, but today we're gonna rock and roll. No hiccups. All is well. Today we have the pleasure of having His Worship, the Mayor of Linden, Mr. Sharma Solomon. Welcome, sir, once
Hi,
again.
thank you for having me on your show, Poor People Governor. You know, the name is so catchy and it's always a pleasure to be on your show, my brother. Blessings. How things?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. Mayor, there's so much that is going on in the town of Linden. For some reason, persons believe that I'm a Lindener, and I take that with great pleasure. I'm not a Lindener, but I have Linden at my heart. It's a tongue that I really love. I visit every time I'm in Guyana, and it's a tongue that I really love. Having said that, I want to ask you for your comment on the, as I would say, the views out and the cuss out that took place yesterday at 5:30. Where we have the president of Guyana in some rude manner addressing his cabinet, members of his cabinet, the MPs and permanent secretaries and that kind of stuff. And what I would describe, a huff and a puff to the public. What are your thoughts on what took place?
Hi again, once again, thanks for having me on the show. And I too thought you were a Lindener. You know, you only corrected this point just now. I saw the last name. I think it's Allen, it's your last name.
Correct.
And I always related you to some of the Allens in Linden. But nevertheless, as mayor, you're welcome and you'll be given that keys once you do come back to Linden, my brother. All right.
Thank you, sir.
This is a very good start of this conversation, and it's very important. I had the opportunity this morning to do a little lengthy conversation on this matter, and I addressed it from a principally academic standpoint. Because you see, when you use any other approach, in my opinion, it becomes easy for persons to distort exactly what is really happening with reference to the management of our resources and more so the general management of Guyana. And when you look at the president's performance at 5:30 yesterday morning, I think it's really a self-reflection of not only those PS and those individuals, but really of himself and government. And that frustration is really directed to himself and government. and it's inescapable. And it is on those three academic principles I believe persons can measure that such a behavior unbecoming of the president to be berating persons who he and his government solely put in charge of managing the affairs that they are now frustrated over, that they are the ones that must be held responsible. It is this president that chose to put almost $700 billion of the budget into the public infrastructural funds under an infrastructural minister. You know, people think you always have to get a degree qualification, but not necessarily degree qualification, but only experience would have said that you're putting a minister that have absolutely no idea of what he's doing within public infrastructure, much less such amount of monies to manage. So what do you reference the behavior of the president to academically? That in management, the first theory of management, in supervisory management, is that you can delegate authority, which you've given to ministerial, you've given to all those officials, but you cannot delegate responsibility. The responsibility is with the president. It is with his government. More so when the president was warned by our international partners in 2022, that embarking on these massive projects is going to leave us exposed to the extent that they're going to be incomplete, they're going to overrun their term, and it's going to cost the country almost 60% more than these projects officially were. That's on file, that's in record. Now, outside of that advice, locally, persons like myself, and I'm sure people like you would have said, you cannot give contracts to family, friends, and favorites. It's not going to work. No one listened to both of those advice given. Now we are where we are, and you see the president demonstrating frustration. Now, how do you then, after delegating the authority to an incompetent minister, to family, friends, and favorite to overlook these works, exclude yourself from the responsibility which basic supervisory management says you cannot? So that's on the first principle. The second principle is what the government over the period would have done is allow all of the regulatory bodies, the institutions, to ensure that we can give proper oversight and governance, which seems to be a very, very lacking area of this government's behavior, governance, to ensure that these institutions are strengthened and the capacity is built so that they can manage and give oversight and look at these works to make sure that no friends, family, and favorite, unqualified, incapable, and incompetent, are allowed to put their hands around $700 billion, where we see roads collapsing and unfinished work and the inability for them to even execute the most basic work. So what you get is, with the weakening of structures, you have a very incompetent culture that was bred and promoted by this said government. Again, that responsibility is with the government. But more than that, what you recognize in everything that this government do, it is about poor planning. And what the planning approach that this government chooses to use in the public policy analysis and assessment is one we call the garbage bin theory, where you put all the ideas in one big bucket and what comes out we run with. And the cash grant as it is at the moment is one such example, where all the ideas are now going into a bucket. We haven't seen what it's going to look like yet, and that is going to form the public policy of the distribution of the cash grant. No clear idea. So in those sort of approaches that you see so far that the government is taking, that 5:30 meeting yesterday morning is a reflection squarely on government's inability to not only manage massive projects and massive resources, but in general, it is showing the inability to manage the resources on behalf of the people of Guyana. So I would not go to the extent to say what we saw, we did not see. What we saw was a display of an individual who should be frustrated, but not with those persons who they have identified to conduct the work, but with himself.
With himself, indeed. That was the mayor of Linden, Mr. Sharma Solomon, and you're having conversations with poor people governor. Mr. Mayor, what are some of your goals, some of your main concern as mayor? Um, uh, what are your main concern, your goals as mayor of Linden for the citizens of Linden? What can they expect of you?
Again, good question, because all this harps back to the government's behavior with reference to governance. You know, in a democratic society, we mostly believe that free and fair elections is the end all be all of what a democracy looks like, without recognizing other elements of a democracy include things such as rule of law and good governance. And our challenge in the municipality deals with the issue of governance principally, because as we look to address moving Linden forward and fitting Linden into the national agenda, it becomes one of how do we deal first with our administrative ability and capacity, which is being affected by government's intervention with the imposition of a town clerk that is there to do principally two things: to frustrate the work of the council, and wherever resources are available, to ensure that those resources are given to family, friends, and favorites, as we have identified before. So, on that level of governance, internal to the administrative work of the council, we do have our challenges. But I'm certain residents can appreciate the work we have gotten done so far. Even as we have those frustrations, we are still proceeding and marching on. And even where we identified, as in the case of Linden Tongue Week this year, where the clerk sold the Tongue Week for $340,000 to our Brishangai major under the disguise that it was a week of activity before planning Tongue Week, even though it was similar in its origin, and the council having taken full charge of that 2024 made for the town of Linden over $10.5 million. It was going to be sold for $345,000. So though we have our challenges in the administration, I think we have so far been able to not, nevertheless, proceed with our course, with our plans. But that is one aspect of where we see as it relates to what we want to get done: a more efficient, effective management structure so that we can able to ensure that we get more work done, but more work that requires our ability to able to effectively, on behalf of the people of Linden, get what they need done. But that's just on the admin. That's the first point. But beyond that, there is a vision for this council. And we've always propagated that vision to be Linden, the heart of Guyana. And it's simple, because not only geographically where we are positioned, that we want to take advantage of that, where we have 6 other regions embracing Region 10, Linden in particular, where we have our 3 main rivers running either around or through this region or town, but also where we are centrally positioned in terms of elevation and all the geography and everything that comes with our location. But beyond that, in the vision is our ability to fit Linden into the national agenda because of all the economic opportunities, whether it's in manufacturing. And we have, as I continue to say, the most reliable and cheapest electricity, but also some of the best skills in Guyana, as Lindeners have been taming the jungles of Guyana for decades and even centuries gone by, in terms of going into the interior, building Omai, building Baishenling, building Goldfield. We're now going off into the Exxon and the island gas. So internal to Linden through the trade school in the days of the Gaimine Bauxite Company, we've developed artisans with some of the best talent and skill that manufacturing in the town becomes something that people would likely to get into. But outside of manufacturing, we have tourism, we have housing. If you want to see the expansion of housing, I think the government would have hinted by the Silica City arrangement that the best place to start to move from massive housing, whether it's on the highway, it's closer to Linden. So Linden, the heart of Guyana, is a concept that we are promoting as a vision to see where we want to fit Linden into the national agenda. And what we have would be events such as the Linden Town Week, where we use as a vehicle to move that agenda when we invite thousands, tens of thousands of people into the town and put on display all of the abilities and opportunities that this town has to offer. Example, in the hospitality and tourism sector, Linden was rated over the past 2 years tourism destination, the best place to visit in Guyana. Not by our own standard, but by the ministry and the tourism and hospitality standards. So those are some of the things outside of the geographical positioning that we have, the opportunities that exist within the town that we want to see as part of the vision to move this community. Of course, fixing the issue of governance to ensure that we have an effective administration to execute our policies, but for those policies to take us to our vision of moving Linden towards that destination as the heart of Guyana.
The heart of Guyana, indeed. When you said Linden is the heart of Guyana, it really and truly is. And if you look at it in any perspective, everything literally passes through Linden. And you have a task at hand as the mayor of Linden, and I can see you're doing a fantastic job. I follow you on a daily basis, and you're keeping the public and the Lindeners updated. That's wonderful of you, sir, I must say. Which leads me to infrastructure. How do you plan to address the current challenges facing this constituency, such as infrastructure and public services?
The community of Linden, in our council, we have the toll booth where we rake some money. We have identified by policy a percentage of that goes into road repairs, which is about 500 to 300,000 a month. Nothing much. So in essence, our infrastructural ability to do work for the town is not significant in terms of getting things done except to patch a few roads. But what we do recognize is through our RDC sister agency, our requests that are made through the aggregating of information from residents in terms of what they need and how it will improve and benefit their lives. Those are taken to the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Public Works, sorry. And what we do see, of course, even though works should be done in this community to identify how special it is, and I say special because of the elevation, of the topography, of the soil structure of Linden being a hilly sand and clay community. What this council would have done over the past several months is ask for a consultant to be hired so that we can, especially after the last couple of months of flooding, understand better how do we employ not only contractors and engineers, but employ the right mechanism to put down these infrastructure in such a unique environment. Because what we recognize over the past years would be contractors unaware of this sort of environment. And within a few months, you have drains that are collapsing, roads that are deteriorating, roads built without drainage. And in them being built without drainage, it is causing a significant amount of erosion and collapse infrastructure. So those are some of the things we have. But I can say to even at the moment, what we recognize is government's unwillingness to listen to the leadership and to work with the leadership. So when you have not only the internal work that we have to do, which is already insignificant to get significant relief to people, wherever government is to intervene, it is done with that sort of selective approach. Those are the Ministry of Public Works support that should be given. But let me get to the massive infrastructure projects in terms of the Linden-Soesdijk Highway that is to be completed or to be rebuilt. Let me get to the Wismar to Mackenzie Bridge that is being looked at and to be built. And let me also get from the Linden to Mabura or the Linden to Lethem Road that is being built. Those are massive pieces of infrastructural works that are taking place in the town. But that road from Linden to Lethem, it was this government who did not want that road to be constructed. It was the UK government, the British government, who insisted that once that road is not built, the funds will not be redirected and the road must be built. So it was at the insistence of a rollover project from the coalition and the British government's insistence that the monies must be used, that that road is being built. We come to the Linden-Soesdijk Highway. That road was constructed almost 50 to 60 years ago to the tune of $61 million by the Canadians, a two-lane highway with the provision for additional 2 more lanes. This government 60 plus years on and spending 161 million US dollars is going to upgrade the highway to the same two-lane, fancy lights they say, and 4 roundabout. That is what we're going to have as the new sets of development. So as I rightly hear, the coalition, in fact, the People's National Congress said at their last General Council and at the last press conference that once returned to government, they're going to see a 4-lane highway. And I think that is the desire, that if you're going to have the artery from Linden to Lethem upgraded, massive movement of vehicles coming in from Brazil, and massive movement of machinery, then it is only fitting that you have the infrastructure to accommodate that when you're going to have a 4-lane bridge to move into a 2-lane highway. It's going to be insignificant to take off that sort of development that you're anticipating. So those are some of the things, even though we're looking internal to patching our own roads, and we continue to amplify to the ministry and the minister to ensure that we have better and more roads, we are also very vigilant of the massive infrastructural works that are taking place and government's inability to respond appropriately to the needs of not only the community, but the needs of the national development and what these infrastructural works should be able to accommodate and what they should be working to allow them to accommodate. Which again, that Linden, the heart of Guyana, and fitting Linden into the national agenda to see us having the means to do so in terms of opening up lands. Let us not forget, Mr. Allen, that Linden is the most intermediate town between the coastland and the interland in terms of population, in terms of development, in terms of frontier destination. And as such, all those infrastructural works coming in should be adequate enough to anticipate that sort of corridor and intermediate arrangement where we can allow for the coast to move to build the interland and allow the interland and the resources coming out to come down to the coast for export. 60% of all aggregates either come from or through this region, whether it's stone, sand, laterite, bauxite capping, and even timber, logging. So in that being said, it is important then that the infrastructure is adequate and is necessary to ensure that we can accommodate not only that, but to accommodate the development that comes with that.
Indeed, the development that comes with that. I want to take you to job creation and development in Linden, locally. What are your take on the job creation and the development in Linden?
The Linden for the past 3 decades, I remember saying this a couple of days ago, I don't know where other community, coming out of the bauxite era. And this is why we are so determined to have the new approach without a disrespect to the generation, but to play, to accept, and to welcome the bauxite generation. That with a decline of bauxite in the late 90s under the PUP government and moving into the 2000s, and even though the then Prime Minister Sam Hines had said to us that to sell the bauxite company to then Bosai, not Bosai, but Omai, for 5 million US dollars. It was then important for us to accept that, and only a few years after, Omai sold that, which now is now Bosai, for over 50 million US dollars. I'm giving you this so that you can understand that when that bauxite company went into that state of decline under its mismanagement, it spelled disaster for the people of Linden. It was the first time people were hearing the word retrenchment. It was the first time people had this community rated as one of the highly indebted community. In fact, we were rated as the most depressed community in Guyana. We were. And in came through the European Union a program called LEAP or LEN, which really came in to diversify. How do we get persons away from that bauxite mentality into diversifying to different economic means? From then to now, this community have not properly crafted outside of the bauxite era, and I think this is where Linden, the heart of Guyana, intends to do, to play on those other elements that I spoke about outside of bauxite. Where do we see manufacturing? Where do we see tourism? Where do we see things such as hospitality? And also, where do we see many other things, natural resources of aggregates? Now that we have so many aggregates moving through the tongue, where do we see downstream products and production in terms of clay brick, moving from clay to clay brick? Those are now things we believe will provide areas for growth and development for job creation. But for this to be done, Mr. Ali, we need government's involvement and we need government's input. And I've always said to people, as a municipality, we are taking three approaches to this. That government must play its part. In line with Constitution of Article 13, the government must be involved and people must be a part of the decision-making process. But where government is unwilling to get involved, the municipality will play its part. And again, notwithstanding the challenges of governance and whatever little resources we have, the municipality will do what it must do. But I think as you ask about this type of job creation and ensuring that we have people be put to work, it is here where Lindeners have always demonstrated that sort of industrious behavior and attitude. And people have started to use those same Linden, the heart of Guyana concept, where we see people are now Lindeners, building their own hospitality industry, Lindeners, getting into small manufacturing to develop bigger, Lindeners, ensuring that we take full advantage of the logging of the export of aggregates. And this is where we see an opportunity for jobs to be created. Of course, we hope to have far more support so that in this support, that Lindeners are not left behind. Because one of the things I can say to you is that over the past 7 years, I remember as regional chairman, I left regional chairman about 12 years, maybe, yeah, just about 7 years, 8 years, sorry. And over the past 7 years, there have been a proliferation of sawmills, of people who are not Lindeners. So you have almost 25 sawmills opening up in Linden. And one would believe that it creates a lot of jobs for Lindeners. And I know we're going to come to the migrant issue later. But it is here where jobs should be created because Linden provides already the cheap resources. So you're getting the logs, you're getting the material, whether it's the aggregates from Linden, and it also provides land for persons to have to make depot for these resources. It's already providing some amount of power because whereas a sawmill pays about $1 million in Perico, it pays about 100,000 in Linden. And this is where you had that proliferation of so many sawmills popping up. And what we found only recently, and we spoke to Minister Todd about this, is that many of the jobs that now should be coming to Lindeners are now going to many of the migrants. So as you ask about that dynamics, though Lindeners are working to create, we hope to see government put more investment in whatever now is being available we are now competing with migrants.
We're now competing with migrants. I want to turn your attention to local governance. How do you ensure that the residents of Linden voices are heard?
Let me say this, as regional chairman and the type of politician um, I've had the opportunity to work among some of the best grassroots politicians. And this includes Comrade Norton also. And one of the things that I know, and I believe it's more effective, I come through, I am at 44 years old. So I believe I'm at the generation where I can look back to those young people in the Gen Zs and the millennials, but I can look ahead to those who are on their way out, if you call it that, our very matured group of people who have served us well. And we are standing in that central zone where I am at the moment. So what I take would be a mix of those experiences gained in terms of engaging the communities. As mayor, we have so far in this for 1 year. This is 1 year, 2 months serving in the capacity of the municipality. And I can tell you we've had almost 50 to 60 meetings of different sorts. Community meetings and public meetings, almost 30 of those. Because it is the most effective way of engagement. It is the most effective way of getting people not only to hear what you have to say, but to hear what they would want you to get from them in terms of aggregating their issues, in terms of taking those issues and articulating them into policies so that we can get the most effective representation. So for us, we started out our campaign in 2023 local government elections with a basic slogan that this fifth council is here to bring right, proper, and strong representation on behalf of the people of the community. We broke that down into our 8 constituencies. We've taken our message very aggressively, but we've also had good support from the public to relate to that exact message, where people not only wait to see their councillors, but with the sort of open door policy and with the sort of very liberal approach to engagement and being able to ground very deeply with our community and residents, that people come to councillors, people come to the mayor, without any hesitation, because they know that that very basic slogan of right, proper, and strong representation will be given. So we have gotten the trust of the community on that level, not only for them to hear and we to hear from them, but in terms of representation and execution. So I remember when we had the imposition of the clerk, this council took to protest action in front of the local government commission. And I think today we are vindicated because of our strident approach to show, and where Linden is now recognizing how detrimental such an imposition has now become to the community, that it is that sort of vocal, that sort of strident representation and resistance that have now made people to become well aware, not only of what is happening, but if actions are not taken, how much it will affect and continue to affect the people in this community. So we're out there and we've broken our representation down again into 3 parts. We are not saying government is not here to work. We are saying government must work in line with Constitution. We are saying that $18 million subvention from government, along with a council that is starved of resources, where policies need to be adopted, this council, very professional as we are, will ensure those policies are there to work for them. But as I said earlier, in our right, proper, strong representation, it now becomes how well are we able to work with our citizens? How well are we able to go into communities? This is a town built on self-help. And people might say, gone are the days of self-help. No, we don't believe it's going anywhere because it served this community well. And self-reliance is a core principle on which the town of Linden was built on. You know, we always boast that Linden is not a place, Linden is a person. And if we know in that person what we found was a spirit of self-help through the house, clothe, feed yourself principle, of where when you put that sort of pressure upon this community, call it an embargo, call it sanctions. And for those who know how those things work, it makes community internalize, build their resources, build their capacity, build their resilience, and they're able to overcome as this community would have been able to do for many decades, notwithstanding being subjected to the harsh treatment of a government that knows that this community deserves much better.
Much better indeed. You know, my grandmother named me after that town, Linden, same exact spelling. I
Hmm.
was named after the president actually, but it goes hand in hand.
Well, that's why we say
Um,
Linden, that's why we say Linden is not a place, it's a person.
exactly. My middle name is Linden. Conversations with Poor People Governor. My guest is Worship the Mayor of Linden, Mr. Sharma Solomon. Mr. Solomon, what steps are being taken to improve public safety?
It's a good question you asked. You know, this morning we had a meeting with the Police Complaint Authority. Um, Tomorrow we'll have a meeting with the Guyana Police Force as they unveil their 2024 Christmas plans. Last week we had an intelligence meeting where all senior officers, fire, police, municipality, RDC head, regional town council, which we have monthly chaired by the regional chairman, Mr. Darren Adams. The week before that, the deputy mayor and I had an engagement with all of the senior police officers in the town. I'm saying this so that you can understand that public safety is a top priority for this administration, for the leadership of the town, and our ability to work closely with agencies that will ensure that we have good public safety features becomes something that we take much pride in ensuring we work closely with those agencies. Not only the issue of public safety, because public safety is beyond public security. Public safety also goes to the safety of the water that we have and ensuring that persons have clean, drinking, portable water. Public safety becomes the issue of our ability to have clean environment and waste management and clean spaces. Public safety becomes how do we ensure our elderly and those less fortunate feel safe and secure in their homes, our women, our children. So beyond that, our relationship in line with public safety also goes hand in hand with public health. And it is on those two key principles, public safety, public health, that the Council, in line with Sustainable Development Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, have started since last year to put together a few initiatives to ensure that we promote public safety and public health as fundamental features in terms of ensuring that this community, as we move to the heart of Guyana concept, is built around. So that you can have, when you come to Linden, clean public spaces that provide both of those two very principal positions. If you go out, you must feel safe. When you go out, your health must not be impeded. And I think over the past couple of weeks, persons would have seen what we would have made a lot of noise about. This is an old bauxite town. In any mining community, you would have toxic materials every now and again not being managed properly. And part of our public safety, public health concern is when we have a minister, Minister Edgel, not taken seriously when samples are done to show high toxicity in the elements of rare earth minerals being found in some of the materials being used for road building purposes. So persons may not see that which was done before as anything to take lightly. But we in this council are saying anything that threatens public health and public safety, we are going to raise the alarm as loud as we have to, because we have made that one of our fundamental pillar to ensure that we take care of our citizens in this town. At the moment, I know through the environmental committee under the stewardship of the deputy mayor, we're trying to get every water source, including Gaiwa, including those who are supplying private bottled water, to be tested. Linden is the most water-centric town, if you call it that, in Guyana. We have about 19 springs, we have about 12 lakes, 15 creeks, we have the major river running directly through the town, and in that hilly sand and clay sort of environment, water and water management becomes a very critical thing in terms of ensuring that people's safety, how they use the waterway, and how they consume that water becomes very important. So we're trying to get samples done on all of those sources so that we can advise if there's contamination, or we can advise persons how to proceed to use that sort of resource. So yes, it is a pillar, public health, public safety of this council in line with our sustainable development goals.
Mayor, I receive a few complaints about an increase in migrants in Linden. Venezuelans, Chinese, they're taking over. How are you addressing this situation for the residents of Linden? Your mic.
This council is very proactive, Governor. Very, very proactive. Last year, when the country was warming up to the idea of referendum being done by the Maduro government, we sat and we watched this government, not put the sort of energy and effort into ensuring Guyanese understood then just how serious this matter was. And we had broken it down onto five principles of, and I'm just dealing first with the Venezuelan issue, that what we had was not just a border crisis anymore. What we had was a Venezuelan crisis, because it then morphed from a border issue to a referendum, to geopolitics, to also the issue of migration and several other issues that came with that. So then what we had was a crisis on our hand, and the government, even to date, have not treated that as a crisis, even as they went into that Argyle agreement, and only recently was chastised by the then British High Commissioner for even meeting with Maduro and getting into that agreement. But that's another story. But last year, we saw that behavior and attitude as dangerous. And what the municipality did, we held several forums which included the likes of people like Ronald Austin Sr. and Mr. Carl Greenidge, Dr. Gary Bess, and others, who held forums at the Lighthouse to enlighten persons, to get them to understand and appreciate just what the depth and magnitude of this crisis is and the danger it posed to Guyanese and Guyana. We also held a motorcade, the only motorcade to be held in the country at the time of the referendum, where hundreds of people participated. We held several public meetings, because then what we were saying to Guyana is that 83,000 square miles with that referendum would have reduced us by taking 62,000 square miles away from Guyana. And in the minds of the Venezuelans, Linden and Region 10 became the new borders of Guyana. It was our principal concern. So what did we say to the government then? That then, like now, you have to help the council to build capacity. Like then and now, you have to build and strengthen the institution of the municipality, so that if you have an influx of migration, and it could be both internal or external migrants of displaced people, being anxious and being wary of what is happening in Venezuela or those bordering towns, the first place they're going to come is Linden. In January at Parliament, the question posed by Member Parliament Amanzo Walton Desir to the then to Minister of Home Affairs, Robson Ben, was, do we have any migrants in Linden? And the answer was no. You see, when we were talking about this in December, he said no in January. We had already known migrant communities across Linden that not only accommodated migrants, but had migrants working very organized and into the system already. It was Minister Todd who, when asked the question, said that there is no migrant issue in Guyana, in Region 10. A couple of weeks ago, a Stabrook News reporter uncovered, this is again not the council now, that we do have a migrant issue in Linden. We do have migrant settlements in Linden. It is only then the Minister of Foreign Affairs came to Linden and said, yes, Linden is with many migrants. And what our on-ground data collection showed, it is an average of over 600 migrants. And these are persons who have come to Linden and have found jobs. They're in areas where Guyanese were squatting in Amelia's ward and were bulldozed by this government. Migrants are now living in those areas in Amelia's ward, squatting. And it is the said Minister of Foreign Affairs, when confronted with this fact, made it appear as though we don't understand our obligations. Well, let me say this, Governor. Not only as mayor, my background in international relations as an academic says that I understand that we have an obligation to our international partners and treaties to deal with displaced people who are fleeing persecution. We know how to deal with that. But those things are clearly outlined in, for example, the International Organization and Migration Charter. Those things are clearly outlined in the Human Rights Convention Charter of how to deal and treat with migrants. But let us not forget, it was the minister and government who first said we had no such problems. Now that it was identified, we are saying, then apply those formulas so that we can do proper tracking, we can do proper resettlement, and we can able to identify how we are dealing with displaced people. And why we are concerned of that? Because now as mayor, I have an obligation to the anxiety that is being raised by the Guyanese public, by the Linden public, that we now have to ensure we say to that public that you have nothing to be worried about except the principles of how we deal with displaced people are being applied. That is not being done. Instead, what we have is the minister coming up here solo. Him and the guy from Go Invest, Peter Ramsarup. I don't know what is his relation to coming up to deal with these migrants. But what we have found out is that they're settling migrants into these same sawmills, 19 sawmills. I told you we'll come to this. They're underpaying migrants at maybe $3,000 to $4,000, which the rate goes to about $8,000 a day for Guyanese workers. So you know Guyanese ain't gonna get the jobs. So soon as a migrant come to Linden, they're nicely given a job and they're nicely settled into a spot to squat, and then they're given areas to go live. That is a deliberate way. When government was saying to us since in January that we have no migrant problem, to know what you call social engineering by bringing migrants into the community and settling them unknowing to the local leaders. And what we uncovered the past couple of months have caused the minister to even feel the need to disrespect the Stabrook News reporter who broke the story. That matter made the Guyana Press Association as a complaint that Minister Todd verbally abused the reporter because she uncovered the migrant situation in Linden. And this is not to promote a xenophobic environment, Governor. This, however, is to bring the reality of what this government would have created, a state of confusion. because of their unwillingness to work with the local leaders, so that those same international principles are applied in terms of how do we apply the International Organization of Migration and all of those United Nations principles to ensure that we deal with displaced people in a humane way, that we can take care of them while at the same time easing the fears and anxiety of our own local residents.
His Worship the Mayor of Linden, Mr. Sharma Solomon. Conversations with Poor People Governor. Mr. Mayor, the high cost of living in Linden and by extension Guyana. How is you as mayor handling or coping with the cost of living for the citizens of Linden? Your mic.
Cost of living, Governor, beat him, wee boy, beat him.
I could tell.
The most you could do is smile. The smile is not out of amazement. The smile is more out of amusement. All right. It is just that what you're gonna do, you're gonna cry. But like I said, the issue of cost of living for the community, Linden is looking at cost of living from a more qualitative approach, as the country is. There is nobody, the government was asked, just let me plug in my charge. My phone device is going. The government was asked a couple of last year to share with us the national census. We've asked government through the Ministry of Finance to get for us a copy of the national census. Because what we believe, everyone can say, give them 200,000, give them 100,000. But does that adequately address in the household the issues affecting the household? That the household can buy the basic 5 items to fill a basket. Maybe the rice, the sugar, the flour, the oil, and whatever peas you may need. And what you find is that many households cannot even afford the basic items to go in that basket, which means cost of living is very outside of people's reach and their ability to deal with that. But how do you get to the measurables? All that is just gap. What I just said to you is just a qualitative gap. Not poor people. What is enough poor people? A number is what gives you the amount. Where is what we asked for in the census? Since 2012, the government released the preliminary version of the census and have not given us the full thing. 10 years on, 2022, a new census is done, and 2012 complete census is not released, and the partial census for 2022 have not been released. So then how do you get from 200,000 a household to 100,000 any person over 18 that live anywhere in the world that call themselves Guyanese? So we know, number one, the government is not seriously addressing the issue of cost of living. Because if they were, then they would have truly understood that in Guyana, there's a more political gimmick that the woman that lives in Bamia and already paying $12,000 to send her children to school because the Bamia primary school is not finished, that 100,000 is grossly inadequate for her up front. She's done taking more than 10% out of that just for the transportation, that this government would have reduced our quality of life to be able to deal with. So the council of this fifth council not having that census is in line with some partners, and I'll name some of those partners: religious, business, and academic. And we're looking to have a bilateral partner to come on board so that it verifies the data that we're collecting, that we're going to run our own data collection, and we're going to run our own household survey. As we would advise every community should do this. Go into your communities, run your own data and acquire your own data that is going to be done with the sort of proof of tangibleness, and run your own analysis. Because I can say this to you, what affects Linden in terms of cost of living is not the same measurement to be used in New Amsterdam, Bartica, Georgetown, what is affecting the people on the West Coast and in Cornelia Ida and in Tushen is not the same measurement that would be used in Plaisance, is not the same measurement that will be used in Victoria. Every community should run there, if not government prepared to give out that census. And even if the census is given, to run your own community index becomes a little more granular and allows you to rake in exactly whether it is cost to live in, whether it is the issue of jobs and unemployment, whether it is the issue of just the state of affairs within the household, that you can acquire more of that data and analyze it. So that is the approach that this town council is taking. We're going to go into data collection and data analysis so that not only to make the claim to government about where we see their intervention, but even for our own self, as we are making policies so that we are guided. We are also a rate collecting agency. We may want to apply an environmental tax, for example. As we see, government is saying to Georgetown, they can't reduce this tax and they can't do that with this tax. When we are going to make a position on our taxation, if we want to do that, we want to be guided with the quantitative approach that you can say based on the number of this, we can apply to that. And based on this, we can able to make this sort of intervention. But besides the interventions that we want to make, we can able to say to government what is really happening in our souls that require their intervention. So that one day you don't have government saying 200 for you, 100 for you. And we might as well do like in Coming to America, Governor. Why we don't make it a cool mill? You know, because we already got not to be measuring this thing on. We just call in numbers. All right. And we might as well just do that. So to avoid something like that, you have to get the data to guide you to justify your approach. And that is what this council is working on.
The leader of the opposition say we're taking, in no uncertain terms, we're taking government. And I strongly believe that we have to take government in order to rectify the wrongs of the PPP administration. His Worship, the Mayor of Linden, Mr. Sharma Solomon. That was our guest, and here's where we bring the curtains down, and I'm asking him to give his last words. Let the people know what is taking place in Linden. Mr. Sharma Solomon, over to you. Your mic.
Again, thanks for having me on the show, and it's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to relate. I think for those who know Linden, we are the only town in this country with such a retarded policy of one TV station. So I can be speaking now, and tonight somebody can go and cuss me out to the public on the TV station, the radio station, and I can't rebut. That is the sort of oppressive environment that we're in, that it violates our constitutional right, that to have persons impeding access to information is a breach of our constitutional right. And this is the only town that we have that. So I'm very grateful and thankful for the opportunity for you to give us this forum to express our views, but for Guyana to know that this is where Linden still remains. I remember we had this engagement with one of our bilateral partners, international partners, and they could not believe that there was such open marginalization and discrimination so ripe and evident in this town. But like we said before, where government is unwilling to play its part, even though it must in line with Constitution as Article 13 outlines, and where the council is unable and incapable based on limited resources, Linden, the heart of Guyana, Linden, not a place but a person, have always demonstrated its resilience, will continue to do so. I was fortunate to be part of tasting that sort of resilience and resistance. I was there to see people, unfortunately persons lost their lives. Our brothers Alan, Ron, and Shemrai. But I tell you this, Governor, it has taken nothing away from the fighting spirit of the people of this town. So if the desire is so needed, to once again, if we have to fight, we will continue to fight.
Continue to fight indeed. Here is where we say so long. Have a peaceful and a wonderful evening. Until next time. Bye for now.